border in the event of a no Brexit deal. Shortly after Johnson became Prime Minister last month, Macron told journalists that he's actually happy to be, quote, the bad guy in Brexit negotiations. Then on the other side, Johnson has a long history of saying rude things about the French and France. So I imagine Johnson will be on his best diplomatic behaviour tomorrow in Paris, and he will likely be relieved to discuss a common British-Franco approach to Iran. That's something that's on the agenda for tomorrow. And he may even try to win Macron over with his immaculate French.
We'll have to wait and see, and we'll certainly be following up that story tomorrow when Johnson makes his way to Paris. Thanks very much, Rosie Collier.
Correspondence Call.
The Italian President Sergio Mattarella begins talks with key partners, or key players rather, today in a bid to end Italy's political limbo, the day after Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte resigned. Well, Conte handed in his resignation after lashing out at far-right Interior Minister Matteo Salvini for pursuing his own interests by pulling the plug on the ruling coalition with the anti-establishment Five Star Movement. Well, for more on this, we're now joined on the line by correspondent Sabina Castelfranco in Rome. The Italian Prime Minister, or former Prime Minister, has handed in his resignation now, Sabina, as head of state. So what happens next?
So yes, Giuseppe Conte handed in his resignation late last night after he addressed the upper house of parliament, the Senate, and after there was a parliamentary debate in the Senate. Now, he has been asked by the head of state, by Sergio Mattarella, to remain in a caretaker capacity for the time being, whilst at the same time Mattarella has opened formal consultations with the various political parties that are represented in the Italian parliament. He will begin in less than an hour at 4 p.m. local time here in Rome with the minor parties, and then we'll move to the more important parties, the larger parties, and should end his consultations by tomorrow at approximately 4 p.m. So he's going to be at it for, let's say, the next 24 hours. And we'll have to see what comes out of these consultations, because unless some agreement is reached, then the country will have to go to an early general poll.
Now, of course, it's not a foregone conclusion that snap elections will happen. So does that mean that the situation might actually backfire for the Interior Minister, Matteo Salvini?
Well, that's absolutely right, because there is quite a lot of negotiation underway between the Five Star Movement, which was one of the coalition partners until now, and the Left Democrats, who were in the opposition. Now, if they manage to reach some sort of an agreement, that would mean they could probably have a majority in Parliament. Now, in the Senate, they would have a very small majority, so it's not really an ideal situation. But what the president is trying to do is avert this situation of limbo for too long, particularly because in these months, straight after the summer, is when Italy needs to present the 2020 budget and get it approved by Parliament.
Okay, thanks very much, Sabina Castelfranco there in Rome, bringing us up to date there with the latest on the political crisis there.
International Report.
Here's a question for you. Can comedy teach us anything about the news? Political stand-up is one of the most popular genres at the Edinburgh Festival, the Fringe Festival. Boris Johnson, Donald Trump, Brexit and Scottish independence, another thorny issue, are all popular themes that are being discussed in the hundreds of comedy shows taking place at the festival. Assa Semake Romain has more in this third and final report from Edinburgh.
At the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, politics is at the centre of hundreds of shows. It's hard to escape Brexit and Donald Trump impersonators in the streets of Scotland's capital. In the age of constant news and political upheaval, current affairs are inspiring artists and comedians, compelling them to give their take on the world we live in. Osman Beg has been a journalist for a decade, working in major news organizations such as CNN, Al Jazeera and Sky News. After retraining as a playwright and an actor, he is presenting his play Fake News at the Fringe. It's a one-man show about a young journalist hungry for recognition, working alone at night in a newsroom, who publishes a story to end all stories. Trouble is, the story was false. The audience may think it never happens, but Beg has witnessed it.
So you do get this unusual situation where an incredibly junior, inexperienced, ambitious person can actually have quite a lot of control, and there isn't much sort of vetting of that. And I have actually seen on one occasion previously, and I won't mention what story that is, I don't want to, tar or, what organization. I have seen, well, actually more than once, major errors go out on air, and afterwards people sort of, that you slap your face with your hand. How on earth could that have happened? And people in the outside world are like, well, how did that happen? That's that massive company. How could they do that? And this story kind of tells you how, in a way. So that's one element of it. Yes, it is all based on kind of legitimate, well, I suppose it's like a journalist, legitimate sources, you could say.
Among the many issues raised in fake news, there is the pressure on media organizations, especially online media, to generate traffic and revenue, and the competition from unverified news sources. Living in a world where a Twitter account has the same influence as a newspaper worries Beg.
There is this idea now with Facebook and things of a confirmation bias or conformity bias, where you gravitate towards the new news or sources that basically tell you what you want to hear or would like to hear. So, you have, say, Facebook pages out there and blogs that genuinely espouse the fact that the world is flat. More and more people can read them, and then it just confirms their bias and what they're thinking. That is what I worry about more, the fact that the entire industry is sort of facing competition from unvetted and, often quite dangerous sources.
Though the title of the play may convey the idea of a criticism of the media industry, Beg says that on the contrary, fake news aims to champion the values of journalism.
This is a defence, at the end of the day, while it is kind of couched in a slightly comedic way and it has funny moments, this is a defence of journalism, and I want people to see that and to understand that while my story might seem like it's sort of stranger than fiction, actually it is a transparent account of the way that world, or at least that world as I know it, is set up. And I want people to realise at heart, journalists are ordinary people, They can make mistakes, they can, even big and humiliating ones, but they can redeem themselves because they still believe in what they're doing. And generally over the course of my 12 years, I have never met a journalist who is anything but altruistic in terms of wanting to get the story and the news and the truth out there. And of course there are challenges, sometimes ego can get in the way, sometimes you really want that promotion, sometimes you may not have time to triple check every single source or whatever. But at the heart of it, this is an industry of good people, and I think that is what I hope that the play conveys, and that people, even when they're joking and may want to use the term fake news themselves and kind of deride something that someone has reported on, I hope that they think twice.
With suffering from Scottishness, Kevin P. Gilday also wants to start a conversation about Scottish identity, Scotland's place in the UK, and issues affecting the nation, such as poverty and a problematic relationship with alcohol. Gilday explains how the idea of this one-man show, a mix of comedy, poetry and music, emerged.
Although I was born in Scotland, my identity felt kind of more Irish than it did Scottish, even though I'd never been to Ireland before. And I think I was always kind of trying to work out what that meant and where I fitted into the country and where I fitted into everything around it. The second thing that was a big trigger was the independence referendum in 2014. So I think that was the first time where I felt like, hey, I kind of want to be part of Scotland, and I kind of want to be part of the conversation about how to make it better and how it can be a more equal society. The third thing was that I was living abroad for a while. I was living in Barcelona for a bit, and when I was there, it was interesting because no one really knew anything about me apart from I was Scottish. It became my defining feature. And it was interesting how that changes from country to country and from place to place.
In Suffering from Scottishness, the audience participates in a focus group to design a citizenship test for an independent Scotland. Gilday plays the moderator of the group and calls people to decide what makes someone Scottish or not.
I don't want to just be on the stage just talking about it and then people were just silently thinking about it. I wanted them to feel like they were part of that decision making, part of that conversation, and I wanted them to be active and not passive in it, which is why at the end of each section I have a vote, and that changes every night. You know, it's like the audience every day is voting for different things and they're voting yes and no for different issues, so it really depends on who's in the room, and I need to just kind of react and go with it, which is terrifying but also really exciting. But yeah, basically I wanted it to be the start of a conversation for a lot of people. I wanted them to be coming out of the show thinking about what kind of Scotland do I want to live in, what kind of world do I want to live in, basically.
Can comedy be a form of activism? For Gilday, it's his own way of making a difference.
If I didn't try and contribute my tiny little bit, which is making a fun show that makes people think about the things, then I would go mad, because then I wouldn't have done anything right. It's like I wouldn't have contributed in any meaningful way. And it's like I'm not a politician and I'm not a public figure and I can't, make people listen to me, but I can get some people to come to a show and maybe have some fun and then maybe think about these things and maybe think about the country that they want to live in and what they can do to add their tiny part to building it. So yeah, I feel like this is basically just my way of making sure I don't feel guilty by doing something and contributing something to the world.
It's often been said that political comedy died in 2016 when Donald Trump was elected as President of the United States. Gilday doesn't believe this is the case.
It's like, how can you satirise people who are already idiots? There's so much great comedy still though, and there's so much still to have a laugh at, and it's, I know though we're saying, it is hard to take the piss out of Donald Trump because, he's already a cartoon character, but there's a whole kind of world around that and a whole kind of personality that's built up around it that I think is ripe for just taking apart and deconstructing. And in the UK we have the exact same thing with Boris Johnson, and in Scotland we've got the exact same thing with both sides of the yes and no campaign, as far as I'm concerned, are at times embarrassing and completely ripe for just getting the piss taken out of them.
Gilday has produced a political show, but even if some politicians are increasingly resorting to comedy and comedians are using their platform to speak about politics, he doesn't believe that both should be put under the same level of scrutiny.
Art needs to start from a place of you being compelled to talk about a thing, right? So I'm like, I really want to talk about this subject or this issue, and then I go out and do it, but I don't have a team of researchers to go and to read every book about it, to find out every detail, to find out every fact, so that I'm completely fact-checked by the time I go on stage. Art has to be coming from a place of emotion rather than from a place of, fulfilling a role.
Fake News and Suffering from Scottishness are appearing at Assembly George Square and Assembly Roxy until the end of the Fringe on August the 26th. Reporting from Edinburgh, this is Assa Samaki-Roman.
Well, it's time now to hear what's happening in the world of sports, and I'm joined by our very own reporter, Damien Shepherd. I've mangled your name there. Tell us, Damien, what are the big sports stories today?
Okay, well, we'll begin in rugby, and France have been dealt a huge blow ahead of their World Cup campaign in Japan next month. Paul Gabrielague is set to miss the tournament after being handed a 6-week ban by World Rugby. The suspension comes after the forward was judged to perform a dangerous tackle on Scotland's John Barclay in Sunday's Test match in Nice. The ruling will keep him out until October 6th, meaning he could miss France's first 3 matches of the tournament. Gabriel Agué has 48 hours to appeal the decision. The suspension comes after the sport's governing body announced a crackdown on high tackles in May this year. The aim is to deliver heavier sanctions for challenges above the waist, which could see far more red cards than we're used to in the sport. Some are sceptical about the change, though, one of those being England boss Eddie Jones.
Potentially, I think we need to get some consistency in that area in the game. You know, in the World Cup, you know, if you lose a player through a red card, as New Zealand did yesterday, it makes the game very difficult. And we saw, I thought, 2 instances today where that could have happened. And I urge World Rugby, although I don't think they do anything at great pace, do they? To get some consistency in that area, because otherwise we're going to have games that are being destroyed by an inconsistent official making a decision on a rule on a law that's not clear. So what I'm saying is that then we need to have some consistency and common sense. I think it's important for the game, really important for the game.
World Rugby are organising a trial period in France where the game will be played with no tackles above the waist. 3 players died in French rugby last year, and if the trial is successful, the law could be made permanent before the 2023 World Cup.
Oh, interesting. So moving on then from rugby, tell us what's happening in the tennis.
Well, there were 3 Frenchmen in singles action yesterday at the Winston-Salem Open in North Carolina. Number 1 seed Benoit Paire and Hugo Humbert progressed to the last 16 of the tournament, while Jeremy Chardy crashed out after being forced to retire. Meanwhile, in women's action, the US Open qualifiers have begun. It was bad news for French representatives in the draw, though, with the Jessica Ponche, Harmony Tan and Chloe Paquet all missing out on a place at the Grand Slam. Finally, in football, England women's manager Phil Neville is calling on footballers to boycott social media in the wake of a number of incidents of racist abuse directed at players in England. French star Paul Pogba is the latest victim of Twitter abuse after his penalty miss against Wolves on Monday night. Manchester United are working to identify those responsible and released a statement publicly condemning those involved.
Thanks very much, Damien Shepherd, there with the sports news.
You can follow RFI English on Facebook and Twitter and email us at parislive@rfi.fr.
You're listening to Paris Live. It's Wednesday, the 21st of August. My name's Amanda Morrow. We're about halfway through our hour-long show, bringing you news and features from around the world. Still to come, a report on the growing number of French Catholics renouncing their faith or resorting to apostasy in the wake of pedophilia scandals. World Music Matters meets Lemma, the all-woman ensemble from Algeria's Béchar region. And as always, our web editor will be joining us for a look at what's making headlines on rfienglish.com.
RFI's Pick of the Month.
Banaphonics. Rachita.
RFI. RFI's Pick of the Month.
Charlotte Adigéry. Mohamed Lamouri.
RFI.
Correspondence Call.
The Indian-administered region of Kashmir continues to simmer 2 weeks after the Indian government, led by Narendra Modi, stripped it of its special autonomous status. Well, for more, we can cross live to correspondent Akmal Khan, who's in New Delhi. He's just returned from Srinagar. He's got the latest from on the ground, where 12 million people have been under lockdown with a total communications blackout in Kashmir. Tell us, Akmer, first of all, what's the latest there with the situation in Kashmir? I know the government's announced the relaxation of the curfew and also the opening of schools. How are people responding to that?
Still, people are under lockdown for the 18th straight day, and it seems like there are no chances that the government will restore communication. But at the same time, government had announced that they would restore landline deals in Kashmir Valley. But as we speak, pro-freedom leaders have given a call for mass march. So it'll be really interesting to see how people will react to that. But again, curfew continues in the valley.
Now, there have been reports of mass arrests in Kashmir. What do we know?
Yes, as of now, 3,000 people have been arrested in Kashmir, and many of them have been flown out of Kashmir in the jails, and that include leaders, political leaders, local leaders, political activists, and young men. So we are not sure that how many people, but according to the government sources, 2,400 people have been arrested. But locals say that overnight raids are being conducted in every part of the Srinagar city.
Now, the US President Donald Trump has again offered to mediate between India and Pakistan over the Kashmir issue. What are people in Kashmir making of Donald Trump and that offer?
Yes, Trump defined it as an explosive situation between India and Pakistan and said that they have been in talks for decades, but nothing concrete has come out of it. People in Kashmir see this as a hope because nothing has happened in the past as well. But as you know, and people of Kashmir know that Trump is a little tricky and he can do anything, whatever he wishes he wants, So it will be really interesting to see in the next couple of weeks how people will react to his comment. And also India has declined any such mediation between India and Pakistan through Trump. Pakistan has really appreciated the fact that Trump has come in between two countries. But again, time will decide how both the countries will react when Trump actually intervenes.
Indeed, and we will be following the situation as it develops in Kashmir. We'll leave it there. Thanks very much. That was our correspondent Akmer Khan on the line from New Delhi, and he has just returned from Srinagar, the capital there of Kashmir. Now, I don't know how much you know about France, but you may know that it's a secular country. The church and the state are officially separated. Catholicism, however, is the main religion. More than 2/3 of French people have been baptised. This may seem surprising because fewer than 5% are practising Catholics and actually attend Mass. What's more, adherence to the church is dropping, especially in the wake of recent pedophilia and sex abuse scandals. It's impossible to know how many people officially renounce their faith, that's to say, resort to apostasy. But even the French Bishops' Conference says that the number of requests is actually going up. RFI's Alexis Bedu met two women who are in the process of officially renouncing their Catholic faith in France.
Ayant reçu mon baptême en votre église le 10 septembre 1985,
Charlotte has been thinking about apostasy, officially renouncing a Catholic faith. She's reading the letter she sent to the parish where she was baptized as a baby in 1985.
je vous fais part par la présente de mon intention de renier mon baptême et de ne plus apparaître dans vos registres.
She had already abandoned her faith as a child, and over the years, she has witnessed ongoing scandals in the church.
Les affaires de pédophilie, les affaires de viol de bonnes sœurs.
Pedophilia, rapes of nuns, this isn't something that surprises me. 15 years ago, when I was thinking about apostasy, in the region where I grew up, there was an incident of incest in a Catholic family. I saw how they reacted, how they rejected civilian justice, and they wanted to appeal to divine justice. At the time, it really shocked me. That's also a reason that I wanted to go forward today.
Extrêmement choquée, et c'est aussi pour cette raison qu'aujourd'hui je veux le faire.
It took her a while because she was worried about her family's reaction. She said they would not understand, which is why she won't tell them even now.
Ils ferment pas les yeux sur ce qui se passe dans l'église.
My family is not closing their eyes on what's happening in the church, but they won't understand the move. They'll take it for a global rejection of their education, which it isn't. But today I feel I can turn my back on this religious part of my education. And I know personally it'll lighten me to no longer be part of the church.
M'alléger de plus faire partie de cette église.
Charlotte has spoken a lot about getting debaptized with her friend Zoe, a few years younger than she is, who has been turned off by many things in the Catholic Church over the years. She got to thinking about officially renouncing her faith during the debate around gay marriage in 2012 and 2013.
To see that the church was clearly against homosexual marriage, that was one thing. Then there's the anti-abortion stance, that's a second reason. And then the stories of paedophilia coming out all over the world, that was big.
The French Catholic Church has been a focal point of these scandals, with sex abuse accusations against priest Bernard Prenat and Bishop Philippe Barbarin, who was convicted this year of covering up the abuse. Zoe ended up involving her family in her decision because in order to get debaptized, she had to find out the date of her baptism. She asked her mother.
And because it was during the Prenat affair, she understood right away. She said, "You want to be debaptized?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, why not? It will raise a debate in the family." Our family is pretty Catholic, though not very practicing. My father told me I was wasting my time, though. Your apostasy will do nothing to change the church, he said. I think that attitude is too bad because it is the one thing we can do. Even if it won't rock the church, if more people do it, it's the only symbolic act we can do to show we disagree.
It's hard to know how many people are taking the step. The website Apostasy for All, which proposes a form letter that you can send to your parish, has seen a tenfold increase in visits to the site over the last several months. The church itself does not provide these statistics.
Soyons honnêtes, sans doute y a-t-il plus de demandes.
Vincent Némon, spokesperson of the French Bishops' Conference, confirms that there are more requests today than before, and he understands.
Le pape, les évêques de France,
the Pope and the French bishops have said it. There have been horrible things committed by priests, and there's a silence that was maintained. Sometimes even bishops covered up these mistakes. We know it. The victims who were abused and who suffered from the silence of the church, we need to first focus on them. And then the other people who didn't suffer directly, but who are angry and scandalized by the attitude of the church. We understand that they want to leave the path that they had taken with church. We are sad about it. If you compare the church to a path, baptism is a first step. People are choosing to leave the path because it's full of traps and obstacles, and it's ugly because the church made mistakes. That this makes people leave the path is understandable.
He evokes the idea of a path that you can leave but not abandon, because the Catholic Church does not allow for you to be officially debaptized.
Je vous demande de radier mon nom et toute autre donnée me concernant du registre des baptêmes.
In the letter to a parish, Charlotte asks to be erased from the baptism registry. A case went to court over this issue, and an appeals court rejected the request in 2014. It said the church could cross out someone's name, but it did not have to erase it completely. For Némon, baptism is a spiritual act.
Le baptême, c'est un pacte.
It's a pact between a person and God, and the only ones who can undo it are the two involved, the person and God. We can't dissolve it. The church isn't an association or a club that you leave by giving up your card.
But he recognizes the symbolism of apostasy, of deliberately asking to be removed from the registry. He worries more about those who don't do it publicly.
There is apostasy, which is a complete, public and voluntary renunciation of Catholicism, which leads to a request to be debaptized. But what about all those people who aren't in apostasy, but who are distancing themselves, who, because of what is happening, are leaving quietly, without saying anything. There are probably many more of those people. And it is to those people that we want to say that we are doing everything to make the church a safe house once again.
Nous faisons tout pour que l'Église redevienne cette maison sûre.
Charlotte is skeptical of any changes in the church and is cynical about what the church is able and willing to hear.
When I prepared my letter, I was thinking about what I would say to my diocese, and I decided it was pointless to give reasons and criticism, because they won't hear it. It'll have no weight.
The French Catholic Church has more than debaptism to worry about. The number of baptisms is also going down. There are about 200,000 a year, half as many as there were 20 years ago.
And that was Alexis Bédu there. And this interview first aired on the Spotlight on France podcast. All 14 episodes are available on our website. And the next new one is coming out on September the 13th. So do stay tuned for that.
This is Paris Live.
And time now for some music with Lemma. That's an all-woman ensemble from the region of Béchar in Algeria. And it was founded by the Franco-Algerian singer Souad Asla. She grew up in Béchar in the southwest of Algeria, listening to and loving the region's traditional repertoires. But the culture is dying out. She talked to RFI's Alison Hurd on the World Music Matters podcast about her quest to keep the tradition alive and to get women from singing in the desert to actually performing on stage in Europe.
Hi, this is World Music Matters. I'm Alison Hurd, and our guest this week is the singer Souad Asla. She left her native Algeria 27 years ago and moved to France, partly to be able to express herself freely in song and above all in public. Asla comes from the small town of Béchar in the arid southwest of Algeria. The region has a rich oral and musical tradition. About 7 years ago, Asla made it her mission to keep it alive and bring it to new audiences in Europe. She returned to Béchar, and in 2015 she formed an ensemble of female percussionists and singers called Lemma, meaning union. They're currently touring with their eponymous debut album, and they launched at Paris's Institut du Monde Arabe, where I caught up with Souad Asla. She wrote this song, Lumti, the only non-traditional piece on the album, as a way of saying thank you.
On était en train d'enregistrer à Alger l'album et je voyais ces femmes, c'était fabuleux.
We were in Algiers recording the album. We'd adapted the recording conditions to suit the women, and I saw them sitting on the floor. They looked wonderful. So Lemti is a tribute to these women. It's my way of saying thank you for following me in this adventure. And I also paid tribute to this extraordinary place, Béchar.
Qui est extraordinaire, qui est Béchar. J'ai réuni ces femmes-là.
I brought these women together to play and above all preserve this region's huge and very rich oral heritage because it's dying out.
Et qui est en voie de disparition.
Souad Asla grew up with the music, dance and songs of the Béchar region in the Algerian Sahara. The album features several of the region's 10 or so different styles of music.
Par exemple, Zefani, c'est un style musical avec énormément de percussions.
There's Zefani, which uses a lot of percussion and is performed at weddings. Hadra, which is used at funerals, and Gnawi, which is also used for healing. Then there's Malhoun, classical music, a bit like Andalusian music from the north, but which comes from this region. Some of the styles, like El Hadra, are religious, but others are not. There are love songs, songs about society, a bit of everything.
Il y a un peu de tout. Sidi Moulana, c'est Ferda. C'est des chants qui se pratiquent dans un village qui s'appelle Kenadza, à 20 km de Béchar.
Sidi Moulana is from the Ferda repertoire, that's to say songs from the village of Kenadza, 20 kilometers from Bashar. They're spiritual songs with a Sufi spirit. It's very traditional music, just clapping and vocals, using only one instrument known as the eferda. It means pair because you play it with a pair of shoes, one on each hand, and you slide them up and down each side of the drum. I love this style of music because it reminds me of my father. He used to organise big ferda evenings and invited old men to sing. The music is so soothing. You close your eyes, let yourself go, and you can feel it run through your body. I get goosebumps just talking about it.
Et on la sent dans tout notre corps, en fait. J'en ai la chair de poule.
Les Mains isn't just about preserving and paying tribute to the cultural heritage of the Sahara, it's also about celebrating women's place in that heritage.
La femme qui chante et qui danse et qui fait de la percussion existe depuis des siècles.
Women have sung, danced and played percussion for centuries, but it was always behind closed doors. When I go back to Béchar, I go to a little village called Tarit. Every Friday women hold meetings called Hadra. They sing, play music and talk about everything, society, daily life, sexuality. It's a free space for women and it's always fascinated me. I saw women in the middle of the desert using music to heal and help one another out.
La femme a toujours été dans la musique.
So I wanted to show that women have always been involved in music by putting these women on stage. We're the first and one of the rare female groups from the Algerian desert to perform on stage and tour internationally, whereas there are quite a lot of male groups playing this kind of music.
Il y a pas mal de groupes masculins qui ont entiers avec notre musique.
The term lema means union or gathering in Arabic. Asla made the group intergenerational so that the women could learn from one another.
Ça va de la doyenne qui a 79 ans et la petite jeune qui a une vingtaine d'années.
The oldest is 79 and the youngest is around 20. It was important to have that age gap. The older ones pass on their experience and we bring our energy. There's a real exchange. I wanted to show the same sense of union and solidarity through music that I grew up with. There are 9 of us, but we perform with one voice.
On est 9, mais on n'en fait qu'un.
Hasna El Basharia plays Gumbri in the ensemble. The 69-year-old is a star in her own right. She was one of the first women to play the percussive stringed instrument known as the Gumbri in public. She likes to say she's the boss, and Swad Asla is happy to with that.
Oui, c'est pas évident. Il faut lui montrer qu'elle est le chef.
You have to let her be the boss. She's extraordinary, although it's not always easy. I used to sing for her. I'm like her granddaughter. But now she's performing in my project, so it's not easy. But there's a lot of love. She's a spiritual mother figure to us all, our mascot.
Il y a une filiation spirituelle, musicale.
In fact, there's a kind of musical and spiritual kinship in the group. We're very close. I feel like they're my aunts, mothers, sisters. You could say I brought my family over here. It was a bit selfish in a way.
C'est un peu égoïste de ma part de monter ce groupe.
Selfish, Asla admits she wanted to recreate a kind of musical family for herself, but apart from Hasna El Basharia, she had to go and hunt down the other women musicians and singers, and it wasn't that simple.
In
the beginning, they thought it was a joke. I had to go and convince their husbands, their brothers. I set up several residences over there, kidnapped them and locked them up in a house in the desert for 10 days to rehearse. It was necessary because although they're artists, they didn't know how to listen to themselves in headphones, what a stage was or an arrangement. how to sing just part of a song. We had to work on that and build the program. They thought it would be easy. They'd say, we've got music in our blood. But that's not enough when you're trying to be professional. You have to work at it. Now I'm very proud of them. They've learned so much. Sometimes they'll say, Swad, we can't hear one another. We need feedback in our headphones. A while ago, they didn't even know what that was.
Alors qu'avant, elle savait même pas ce que c'était un retour.
Lima are building up a strong following now. They've performed across Algeria, here in France, and are now touring widely in Europe. On stage, they look confident, whether they're dancing, sitting on the floor playing percussion, or singing. They're Muslim, but as Asla says, they don't shout that from the rooftops.
Ces femmes, avant de monter sur scène, elles font leur prière et elles mettent leur voile.
Before going on stage, the women pray and put on their veil, but they're brightly coloured and shimmering. They dress up, put makeup on, they look beautiful, and it's clear they feel beautiful. That's the Islam I grew up with. Wearing the veil is a tradition, but we never saw the black veils you see now, the ones people are afraid of. The image of Islam has been tarnished of late, but we're here simply to share our musical heritage and a moment together.
Un moment de vie, tout simplement. Vous savez, la revendication, ça se voit sur nous, elle est sur scène. La liberté d'expression.
When we're on stage, it's clear what we're asking for. Freedom of expression, freedom for women, a real place for women in music around the world, whether in Algeria or here in France, because even here, it's difficult to get our music heard. And as a Maghrebi woman, I don't know what's happening, but it's getting harder. Doors are closing. You can't imagine how hard it's been to get this project off the ground. Thankfully, I found a tour manager to promote the project, but it's taken me 5 years battling on my own, and it's been difficult.
Ça fait 5 ans que je me bats toute seule. C'est pas évident.
Given the challenges, Swad Asla has good reason to be proud of what she and the group have achieved with the help of several notable festivals.
C'est incroyable parce que ce projet, j'ai eu des gens extraordinaires qui ont cru en moi.
I've been very lucky to meet extraordinary people who believed in me. First, the Babel Festival in Grenoble, then Africolor, then Avignon. I wasn't expecting that. I started the project for myself, but it's taking off, and I'm happy.
Ça prend bien, je suis heureuse.
That was Swad Asla, founder of the all-women group Lima, from Béchar in Algeria, ending this edition of World Music Matters. From me, Alison Heard, thanks for listening.
We've got 5 minutes left of today's edition of Paris Live, and we round off the programme with a look at what's making headlines on our website, rfienglish.com. I'm joined by Mike Woods. Mike, first off, one story that we've been following this week, the standoff between the Open Arms humanitarian ship and Italy. Migrants aboard that ship have arrived on Lampedusa.
That's right, Amanda. They arrived late yesterday evening when they finally got authorization to come to shore. They'd been out there stranded in the Mediterranean Sea for about 6 days beforehand. There were more than 80 migrants on the bridge or on the boat, and Many of them had been on board for 19 days after having been picked up while trying to make the difficult journey from Libya to Europe in much smaller boats. What happened was that there was a standoff between the Spanish charity that was operating their vessel and the Italian government, namely with the far-right Interior Minister Matteo Salvini, who sought to deny the boat's entry to the Italian island. There's nothing new there because Salvini has been blocking humanitarian ships from docking in Italy for months now. But this time it put him against Spain's defense minister, Margarita Robles. In recent days, she said that Salvini's position was a disgrace to humanity and that Salvini himself has shown that he doesn't care about human lives. It was actually a Lampedusa prosecutor who allowed the ship to dock after his teams found horrible conditions on board the ship.
Right, now, Mike, we also have the sad story of the French musician in Canada who was taken by a bear.
That's right. There's been news coming out about this in recent days. It's about a French composer and, a recorder of sound in general called Julien Gauthier. And recorder of sound, that means that part of his creative work was going to natural settings to record sounds of nature. So he was in the Canadian territory, the Northwest Territories, which is a vast wilderness in the northwest of the country. And he was on a canoe trip that was covering 1,500 kilometers. He was traveling with a friend and gathering recordings of the natural sounds for use in his music. They were about halfway through their long canoe trip down the Mackenzie River when a bear attacked Gauthier in the night between last Wednesday and Thursday. His friend, whose name was Camille Toscani, found another group of travelers who alerted authorities, and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police found the body on Friday afternoon. The RCMP itself hasn't confirmed the identity of the victim until after an autopsy is performed, but friends and associates have been releasing information about the incident. Gautier's companion described him as an ambitious artist, joining his love for music, nature, and adventure. And he actually met his traveling companion, Toscani, during a 5-month stay on the Kerguelen Islands, which is a remote French territory in the southern Indian Ocean. He'd been there recording sounds of the island's penguins, seals, and other wildlife that he later used in a symphony. And he was planning to do a similar project with the sounds that he would have gathered in Canada.
A sad story indeed. Before we let you go, Mike, now it's been a nice summer for the politicians, but the French government is reconvening ahead of some pretty sensitive reforms. Tell us about that.
Well, the cabinet ministers of the government under the administration of President Emmanuel Macron met for the first time after a 3-week break today. The main message that's come out of this meeting today from the government spokesperson, Sibeth Ndiaye, was that Macron still wants to continue his ambitious agenda of deep reforms, but this time with what she calls new methods to respond to the fears of the French public. That's no doubt a reference to the anger that fueled the Yellow Vest movement that began last year. This movement's weekly protests have dwindled to a tiny hardcore, but they could flare up again in the autumn, and a proposal to reform the pension system really seems to align with their concerns. Other sensitive issues are plans that could to open up medically assisted procreation to women in same-sex relationships. That could raise the ire of the same folks who led a heated but unsuccessful campaign to stop the French government from legalizing same-sex marriage in 2013. And there's also ongoing tension in hospitals where emergency ward staff have been protesting consistently since March over their working conditions.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. That brings us to the end of Paris Live for today. Have a great afternoon.
It's okay. Okay, cool. Modi's talks with Macron are expected to continue the two countries' long-standing cooperation on energy, climate, defense, and counterterrorism. Then, at the G7 meeting, which India is attending along with 3 other nations as partners in protecting democratic freedoms, the focus is on the environment and the digital economy. The meetings come as India maintains a communications blackout and security lockdown in its part of the contested Kashmir region, after revoking the region's semi-autonomous status earlier this month. However, Srirem Sundar Cholia of the Jindal School of International Affairs near New Delhi doubts that this issue will mar the Franco-Indian relationship. France's position, or at least its lack of much to say about Kashmir, France's lack of having much to say about Kashmir does have its critics, though. Myra Kamdar, a Paris-based author of books on modern India, says that there's much room for Macron to take a firmer stance. There are doubts, though, that Macron will see it in France's interest to make much of a fuss over the Kashmir events. Olivier Guillard is associate professor. No. There are some doubts that Macron will see it in France's interest to make much fuss over the Kashmir events. Olivier Guillard, associate research fellow at the French Institute for International and Strategic Affairs, suspects that diplomats will have laid the groundwork for a very nuanced approach to the issue. Likewise, Guillard does not expect G7 leaders to push too hard on the issue either. Still, the issue does have international repercussions, especially considering the tensions raised between India and Pakistan, both nuclear-armed countries. So, Srirem Sundar Cholia says that Modi may take the opportunity to lay out India's position to the G7 attendees. Delegates of 24 countries and unions in all have been invited to the Biarritz summit this weekend, and whatever happens there, Modi will again be facing world leaders on a march. Delegates of 24 countries and unions have been invited to the Biarritz summit this weekend, and whatever happens there, Modi will again be facing world leaders on an even larger scale at the annual United Nations General Assembly in New York next month. Okay.